My name is Scott Weiser. I am a director and animator. I have worked on more than 30 projects, both short and feature length. And my favorite projects have been film pitches that I've created. One of those was Layers, a short film, which I premiered at CTN a couple of years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. And I'm just working to build this into a full studio where I can direct an animated feature remotely online. So my dream really was go to Disney or Pixar or DreamWorks, a big studio, work my way up and become a director. That was the dream. And I didn't know how I would get there. I did Animation Mentor, broke into the industry. And then the point where it shifted was there was this crisis in the industry where lots of studios were laying people off. And what looked like was going to be a few months of unemployment became 18 months of unemployment. I would wake up and I would work, your 8 to 5 schedule. And I would work on, animating another shot, creating a new piece of animation every day. And then the rest of the time would be networking. It would be applying for jobs, but I treated it like it was a full-time job. My dream of being a director resurfaced again. And so I actually took a break and I wrote this little short book called Invisi and the Misfit Supers. And it was a pitch about misfit superheroes. So after the 18 months of unemployment, I did break back into several studios in Vancouver. One was Rainmaker, and then Bardell, and then Braun. That was great to be back in the studio environment. But as I pitched projects like Vanishing Ink, Cirque du Solitude, I started to discover that if I wanted to really put the time that the director journey would require in, that I needed to kind of create my own startup type of thing. You have to have different levels of pitches. So you have to have one that you can do in 30 seconds or less, and then one that takes a little bit longer that you can start to go into more detail, and then on from there. Now, you don't want to go in and give them the half-hour pitch, right? Where you give every little detail and all the cool things that you have planned. And actually, if I didn't know the direction I was going, if I don't have something really prepared, I probably wouldn't try to get experienced eyes on it yet. I would try to wait until there's something a little bit more prepared, a little bit more valuable for them to interact with. When it comes to just showing just anybody, the beauty of that is that when somebody else is watching it, if you listen very, very, very closely to your inner artistic voice, you can start to notice, I'm worried about that moment. What do they think of that moment? And then you can watch the reactions and say, they laughed at that spot I wanted to, or they didn't laugh. Why didn't they laugh? And once you show it to multiple people, you can start to dial into where the possible problems are. So it is definitely up to the director or the creator of a project to come up with the solutions. But, without that feedback, you might not be able to know where the symptoms are or where the problems are. Well, let's use Layers as a short film, the short film, for example. I had finished that film. I've shown it to lots of audiences. I think I very clearly see that film now. You have to kind of straddle that line between personal and commercial. You have to understand that you're delivering this to an audience, and the audience kind of needs to be built in. The producer needs to be able to see how he can sell this so that the investors know that this is a good investment, which is tricky for film because film is generally considered a dodgy investment in lots of investor circles, depending on the team and all that are involved. So yeah, I think that you do need to think commercially and do need to think personally at the same time. So I think that the more experienced you are, the more you can be personal. And the less experienced we are, the more we have to be commercial. We need to realize that we have a market and we're satisfying the need of that market or the wants of that market. For me, my roots are in solid storytelling. And it is interesting that you talked about how sometimes we'll get this project that we think this is going to be the be all end all. It's going to be our calling card. It's going to do amazing things. It's something original that's never done before. And more I'm starting to feel like as a storyteller, I am not as important as I think I am. And I think that a lot of films that could be great are ruined by the director wanting to show off, to show how wonderful they are, right? And then they end up making choices that really aren't right for the story. They're just maybe innovative, or maybe what the director feels is cutting edge, but at the same time, it's not what this is right for the story. So it's up to us to discover the truth along with the characters, rather than say, okay, politically, I think this, right? Or religiously, I think this. And I'm going to make a story that proves that. I think that it's good to say I'm going to make a story that explores something, like that explores any topic that humans care about. But at the same time, I think that we need to be open to discovering what that story has to teach us, rather than us, telling the world, well, I'm so wise, this is what I'm going to tell you. I have heard several people say that you do need to not have a backup plan. You need to be all in. You need to really decide that you're going to do this thing, and that there's no turning back. And that's actually how the hero's journey is structured, right? There's this point of no return where you have to make it so the character can't go backward, right? And as creators, we need to be like that in a way. And it's tricky. Artists want to be able to do everything. You'll meet an artist at CTNX who's like, I'm a character designer and an animator and a background designer and a rigger, and they do all these things, right? And when you're first breaking into the industry, the people who are the most successful pick a focus. And then if they branch out once they've really, really set deep roots into that focus. So my focus was animation. Another person's focus would be storyboarding. And I've done plenty of storyboarding since, but I wasn't able to branch out until I really had an established skill that people could see, okay, I'm going to pay money for this skill, right? There have been a lot of moments where I've sat and wondered if this impossible dream that I'm committed to, if I'll ever make it, if all of it is just a waste of time. And it happened several times. It happened during that season of unemployment. And I actually had somebody tell me very wisely that they thought that was going to be one of the greatest periods of my life. And I thought, that is a ridiculous thing to say. But now that I look back, all of the things that I learned, having gone through those hardships, it made it a lot easier for when I'm trying to move my career to the next step, to say, okay, I'm going to go through some pain, and that's okay. Our society nowadays is very obsessed with happiness, right? And we've got to be happy. And if you're not happy, something's wrong with you, right? To realize, okay, I'm going through some suffering, that's okay, because that's what makes life meaningful. All the stories that I go and I'm inspired by, like Viktor Frankl's, or all the great films that I've watched, the inspirational films of that person who has that big hardship and then they work in spite of it. That's what makes the stories inspirational, is the actual suffering, and then the being able to find joy in spite of that suffering. I think if you can learn to like that process, and then maybe it doesn't hurt so much to dream. I have this pitch out there, right? And I have bites on it, and I've worked really hard to update it and to send the promised update to a producer. And then I wait for 2 weeks. And that 2 weeks can feel very, very, very painful, right? Because it's like, well, maybe they don't like it. Why aren't they responding? And with some producers, it's been, a couple months and I haven't heard from them. So what's going on there? Are they just too busy, or just do they hate the project? And there's all this self-talk we do. I think that's because I'm thinking about it wrong. I'm making the end result the most important thing, where if you're going to reach any level of quality or proficiency or any level of greatness in your work, you have to learn to enjoy a process and not just an end goal. So the end goal might be Disney, but how can I love designing characters on my own in my cold, dark basement, when there's no money coming in? How can I learn to enjoy that process and let that be what fuels the joy, what fuels the machine as a journey toward the Disney? When I was little, I would actually imagine all these little stories in my head, and I would walk around the basement, and my mom was actually quite concerned about me, because I was always like hopping along the furniture and making all these sounds. And she's like, is he okay? Does he maybe have some sort of a disability or something? And maybe I did or do, But I think what I was trying to do there was I was trying to learn. I think when I'm telling a story, I'm trying to figure something out about life that I just cannot understand. And I think that is my why. I think that deep down, I know that in order for me to reach my full potential as a human being, that I need to know the truth as clearly as possible. And that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of time and effort, maybe a lot of stories, that I'm going to have to tell.